The chandeliers of the Westbrook Hotel ballroom cast a golden glow as I stepped into Margaret's 55th birthday gala, my heart flickering with a fragile hope of mending the rift that had grown since my father's death a year ago. I'm Clara Carter, 31. Once a pianist who toured the world, now the unexpected CEO of Carter Manufacturing, a legacy Dad left me. That night, I'd slipped into a black gown, clutching a champagne flute, believing my stepmother's invitation signaled a truce after months of cold silences and barbed glances. For 12 tense months, her resentment, and her daughter Elise's sly smirks, had simmered beneath the surface. But I'd come anyway, yearning to heal the wound Henry's passing had torn open. How wrong I was. Barely an hour in, Margaret's voice shattered the festivities. "Return what isn't yours, Clara. You stole Elise's birthright." Her words a thunderclap that turned every head in the room. Houston's business elite, clients, suppliers, leaders I'd worked tirelessly to impress, stared, their murmurs swelling into a tide of accusation. My hands trembled, the glass nearly slipping, as her ambush hit like a freight train. Not a gesture of peace, but a ruthless strike to humiliate me. Yet amid that storm of shame, a spark flared. I wouldn't let this stand. I'd fight back, not with tears or pleas, but with the ironclad truth my father had armed me with. A truth she'd never bury. The ballroom's grandeur felt like a cruel, just as Margaret's voice sliced through the air, sharp and unyielding. "Return what isn't yours." My chest tightened, a vice clamping around my ribs as I stood rooted to the polished floor, the champagne glass slick with sweat in my hand. The glittering chandeliers overhead seemed to flicker, their light paling as her accusation landed like a physical blow. "You stole Elise's birthright!" she roared, her silver gown catching the glow as she advanced, heels striking the marble, with a rhythm that echoed my racing pulse. The crowd parted around her, a sea of faces. Clients I'd spent late nights sealing deals with, suppliers I'd charmed over coffee, community leaders who'd once praised my vision, now turning to me with eyes narrowed in suspicion, their whispers a rising tide. She took it? A thief at a gala? I scanned the room, desperate for a lifeline, a single friendly gaze amidst the Houston elite I'd fought to belong to, but all I found was a wall of doubt, their respect crumbling like ash in the wind. I opened my mouth to defend myself. That's not what happened, but the words came out frail, barely a whisper against the storm of her fury. Dad's will was clear. I tried again, louder, clutching at the memory of his frail hand in mine, his voice steady despite the cancer eating him away. Margaret didn't falter. She surged forward, cutting me off. Not his piano-playing charity case who barely visited. Her words were a dagger, plunging into the guilt I'd carried for years, the nights I'd spent on stages across Europe while Dad faded in Houston. Tears welled, hot and unbidden, as her barb struck true. I hadn't been there enough. A regret I'd wrestled with in silence, now flung at me like a public execution. Behind her, Elise loomed, her lips curling into a smug half-smile. Her silence, a louder taunt than any shout, nodding along as if this was her victory too. A crown she'd never lifted a finger to claim. The room spun, the air thickening with their judgment. Margaret's voice a relentless hammer. That company was Pamela's. And I felt the weight of every eye, every whisper, pressing me toward the edge. The chandelier's glow dimmed in my vision, the world narrowing to her advancing figure, her triumph a noose tightening around my neck as I stood there, defenseless, the target of an ambush she'd orchestrated with chilling precision. The murmurs grew into a roar as I stumbled toward the ballroom doors, my legs unsteady beneath me, the weight of Margaret's words still ringing in my ears. "She only showed up when Henry got sick," a voice hissed from a table near the stage, a supplier I'd met over contracts just last month, his tone now laced with venom. "I always thought it was strange," another added, a client whose handshake I'd earned after hours of negotiation, his words now a betrayal that cut deeper than I'd expected. These weren't faceless critics. They were Houston's business elite, the backbone of the community I'd poured myself into since Dad's death, people I'd fought to prove myself to with late nights and hard-won deals. Now, their respect, unraveled, replaced by a chorus of disdain that clawed at my spine. "Nobody wants a thief here," Margaret declared, her voice calm now, dripping with the confidence of a victor who'd already rewritten my story in their minds. The booze started soft, a low rumble from the back, then swelled, bold and unapologetic, a sound that echoed off the gilded walls and sank into my bones. I pushed forward, hands trembling, the air thick with hostility as their gazes bore into me, clients who'd once praised my leadership, suppliers who'd trusted my word, leaders who'd nodded at my vision, all now united in scorn. My black gown felt like a shroud, the fabric clinging as I reached the exit, the doorman's pitying glance a final lash before I broke free into the parking lot. Alone in my car, the dam burst. Tears streamed down my face, sobs wrenching from my chest as I gripped the steering wheel, nails digging into the leather. The humiliation seared through me, an acid eating at my core. Not just from Margaret's attack, but from the community I'd bled to join. Their rejection a brutal unraveling of the trust I'd spent a year building. I pressed my forehead to the wheel, the cold metal a faint anchor as I drowned in the wreckage of a night that had turned allies into accusers, leaving me isolated in a city I'd called home. Henry Carter wasn't just my father. He was the soul of Carter Manufacturing, a company he'd raised from a single workshop into a Houston cornerstone over 40 years. When Mom died, I was 12, and the house grew quiet, her absence a shadow that never lifted. 3 years later, he married Margaret, bringing her and her daughter Elise, also 12, into our lives. A patchwork family stitched with uneven threads. Dad was my compass, guiding me through piano keys and teenage storms, his steady hand a constant even as Margaret's cool distance settled in. Then cancer came, 3 years ago, a thief in slow motion, and I'd sit by his hospital bed, watching him fade. One night his voice rasped through the haze. "Clara, you've got a mind Elise doesn't. She's clever, but she doesn't care about this company. You do." His eyes, dim but fierce, locked on mine. "I've seen how you think, how you dig into problems. I'm giving it to you. Promise me you'll keep it strong." I squeezed his hand, tears blurring his face. "I promise, Dad," and meant it, trading my stage lights for factory floors to honor him. The will's reading was a quiet affair. Margaret nodded, Elise shrugged, and I thought they'd accepted it. I'd thrown myself into the role, growing the company 22%, navigating crises to save jobs, proving his faith wasn't misplaced. But acceptance turned to sabotage. Margaret's sidelong jabs, Elise's smirks, a slow campaign that festered beneath their smiles. I'd catch Dad's photo on my desk, his grin a reminder of why I stayed, why I fought. His legacy wasn't just steel and numbers, it was trust, a baton he'd passed to me alone. That night at the gala, Margaret twisted it into a lie, claiming I'd snatched what he'd freely given, her venom a betrayal of the man who'd built it all, a man whose voice still echoed in my bones, urging me to stand firm. The parking lot swallowed me as I slumped in my car, the gala's echoes still pounding in my skull. Margaret's shouts, the crowd's boos, a tidal wave of shame. Tears streaked my face, my breaths ragged as I gripped the wheel, the night's wreckage sinking in. Then my phone buzzed, cutting through the haze. Charles Wesley, Dad's lawyer and will executor, his text stark. "Just heard. You okay? Call me." My hands shook as I dialed, the line crackling before his deep voice broke through. "Clara?" I spilled it all, voice fracturing. "She called me a thief, Charles. Said I stole it from Elise. They booed me out. Everyone I've worked with believes her." The words tumbled, raw and jagged, my chest heaving as I relived the sting. "Unacceptable," he growled, indignation rumbling through the phone, a lifeline in the dark. "Margaret knows Henry was lucid when he chose you. She's lost 3 appeals already." I whispered, "They think I'm a fraud, the weight of their judgment crushing me." A beat of silence, then his tone shifted, sharp. "Got your laptop?" I blinked, confused. "In the trunk." "Meet me at my office in 30 minutes, he said, firm. "If she wants a public fight, we'll show them the full truth. Every file, every ruling, everything Henry left to shield you." His words struck like flint, sparking a fire through the fog. Anger, yes, but something more. A resolve to claw back what she'd torn away. I wiped my eyes, the tears slowing. "I'll be there in 20. And turned the key, engine roaring. As I sped through Houston's neon-lit streets, humiliation morphing into a quiet, burning determination. Charles wasn't just help. He was my weapon, and I'd wield it. Charles' office glowed like a beacon in the downtown night, a glass tower cutting through the dark as I pulled in, laptop bag slung over my shoulder. He buzzed me up, silver, hair bent over stacks of files as I stepped inside, the air thick with purpose. "Henry saw this coming," he said, voice steady, gesturing to binders meticulously labeled. Court decisions, financials, a USB drive glinting on his desk. He plugged it in, and Dad's face filled the screen, gaunt, 3 months from death, but his eyes sharp. "I'm leaving Carter Manufacturing to Clara. She's got the mind and heart. Elise doesn't. She's told me so." Clips rolled. Elise at dinner, scoffing, "I don't want to make boring parts." Then brushing off a management role. "Not my thing." Charles slid over rulings. Margaret's challenged the will 3 times, lost everyone. No judge saw manipulation. Henry was sound. I clutched the USB, fingers tracing its edge, memories flooding back. Dad's hospital room, his weak grip, his trust unwavering even as his body failed. "More here," Charles said, piling on. My 22% growth stats, employee letters praising my leadership, Elise's email rejecting a director role. Too much paperwork. His gray eyes met mine. "This is your armor, Clara. She can't twist. This." My breath caught, shame peeling away as I held Dad's voice in my hands, a shield he'd forged for this exact moment. Margaret's lies loomed, but here was truth. Irrefutable, weighty. A lifeline pulling me from the abyss she'd pushed me into. The clock ticked past 10 p.m., Charles's office a hive of quiet frenzy as we bent over his desk, the hum of his printer a steady pulse. Court rulings spat out, crisp and final, 3 losses for Margaret, followed by financials charting my 22% growth, employee testimonials I'd never seen. Clara saved us when Anderson bailed. I sorted them into binders, 1 for each Gala. Table, my hands moving with a rhythm born of fury and focus. Charles dialed 3 colleagues, lawyers of standing, who agreed to join us, their voices crackling through the speaker. "We're in." The printer whirred, pages stacking high. Dad's video, Elise's refusals, my record, each a brick in the fortress we'd raise. "This isn't just a defense," Charles said, sealing a binder. "It's your permanence." I nodded. Dad's words ringing. "Overwhelm them with evidence, Clara, so they regret doubting you." My fingers trembled, not from fear now, but anticipation. Margaret's ambush had lit a fuse, and this was my detonation. We loaded the SUV, binders heavy, with truth, the weight grounding me as I climbed in beside Charles. The night stretched ahead, Houston's lights blurring past, and I felt it. A shift from victim to victor, a fire stoked by every page we'd prepared. Margaret thought she'd broken me, but she'd misjudged the steel Dad had forged in me, a steel I'd wield to reclaim my place. The Westbrook Hotel loomed as we rolled up, Charles's SUV packed with binders, 3 lawyers in sharp suits flanking us like sentinels. My pulse hammered as we crossed the lobby, the doorman's eyes widening. He'd seen me flee in tears, now watched me return armed. The ballroom buzzed, glasses clinking, laughter spilling, until I stepped through, Charles at my side, and a silence swept outward, sharp and sudden. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charles boomed, "I'm Charles Wesley, Henry Carter's counsel. We're here to set the record straight about Carter Manufacturing." His team fanned out, binders landing, on tables with soft thuds, pages rustling as guests hesitated, then opened them. I took the stage, microphone cold against my palm. 2 hours ago I was called a thief. Here's the truth. My father chose me. Charles fired up the screen, Dad's voice raspy but firm. "Clara's my successor. She's proven it. Elise declined every chance." I faced the crowd. "I've grown this company 22%, saved jobs. See your binders." Heads bent, fingers flipping, growth charts, Elise's email. Not my thing. And the tide turned. Whispers softened, eyes lifted, some nodding as Dad's words sank in. Margaret's triumph faltered, her lie cracking under the weight of evidence I'd hurled back. The room shifted, hostility fading to uncertainty, then recognition. And I stood taller, Dad's trust my sword, cutting through the night's venom to reclaim my ground. If this showdown gripped you, subscribe now. Don't miss what's next. The video faded, Dad's face vanishing from the screen, and Margaret lunged. "This is my party!" Her voice a snarl, her silver gown flashing as she charged. Charles's colleagues stepped in, calm and immovable, halting her mid-stride. Elise trailed, her composure cracking. "You twisted him when he was dying!" Her accusation shrill, desperate. I met her gaze, unshaken, as Charles countered. Hospital logs. Clara visited 83 times in his last 6 months. Elise 12, Margaret 37. He held up the page, binders flipping open around us, the room gasping as numbers told a story her words couldn't touch. Elise's jaw dropped, her smugness evaporating as guests turned, their stares pinning her now. Margaret hissed. "The company was our future." Her mask slipping, raw greed spilling out. "Dad's trust secure you," I said, voice steady. "He gave me his work because he knew you'd ruin it." Her eyes blazed, a moment's fury that made me brace for a strike, but she grabbed Elise instead. "This isn't over," and stormed toward the exit. Charles's voice followed. "It is. Further challenges will face sanctions." Their retreat was a collapse, heels echoing as they fled, the crowd's silence a judgment, heavier than any shout. Margaret's ambush had imploded, her power shattered by the truth I'd laid bare. Dad's voice, my record, their own words turning the tide until they stood exposed, defeated, in the wreckage of their own making. The ballroom exhaled as Margaret's figure vanished, the air loosening like a held breath released. Gregory Thompson, our top client, rose from his table. "Clara, I'm sorry. I should have questioned her." His voice cut through, steady and public, a crack in the wall of scorn I'd faced. Others murmured, heads dipping into binders, charts, of my 22% growth, employee letters. She fought for us. And the tide shifted. Applause sparked, tentative at first, then swelling, a wave of acknowledgement washing over me. Edward Winters, Dad's old CFO, shuffled forward, his grip firm. On my hand, "Henry picked right, you've got his spine." His words landed soft but deep, pride blooming where shame had rooted hours before. Guests edged closer, apologies quiet. We were wrong. Congratulations firm. Well done. Some confessed they'd doubted Margaret's tale but feared her sway. Now, binders in hand, they saw the truth. My work. Elise's indifference. Dad's unwavering choice. The hostility that had driven me out melted into respect, their nods a balm to the night's wounds. I stood amid them, no longer the outcast but the leader Dad had envisioned, my place forged anew in the light of evidence they couldn't deny. The room buzzed again, not with scorn, but with a cautious warmth, a community I'd reclaimed, not through pleas, but through the weight of what I'd built and the father who'd believed in me. 2 weeks later, Elise slipped into my office, her hands fidgeting. I need a job. Mom's burned through her savings on those lawsuits. My trust's locked for 3 years. Her voice was flat, no smirk now, just a raw edge I hadn't expected. Why me? I asked, suspicion tightening. My chest. You're the only one making it, she said, eyes darting. Everyone else is just pretending. Charles had warned against it, but I saw no guile, only necessity, and offered her an entry-level marketing spot. She took it, and to my shock, she thrived, quietly competent, a thread of respect growing where enmity once stood. We're not sisters, not friends, but there's a truce, fragile and unspoken, a shift I hadn't foreseen. Margaret didn't linger. Weeks after the gala, she packed for Phoenix, chasing a wealthy widower, her exit a silent surrender that left Houston lighter. I heard it through whispers, her social circle thinning, her schemes unmoored, and felt relief, her shadow lifting from my days. The gala's fallout redrew lines. Elise found a foothold under my roof. Margaret vanished to a new stage, and I held firm, turning a foe into a reluctant ally, my grip on Carter Manufacturing unyielding against the chaos she'd tried to sow. 6 months on, Carter Manufacturing soared, 32 new hires, a second plant in Austin, contracts surging as the gala's truth took root. I launched the Thomas Carter Foundation, weaving music into underserved schools and mentorship into young entrepreneurs' lives, a bridge between the pianist I'd been and the CEO I'd become. At the launch, I played Chopin's Nocturne, Dad's favorite, on a grand piano hauled into the factory, notes dancing through the hum of machines. Employees gathered, their faces soft with pride, and as my fingers moved, I felt him, Henry, his spirit woven into the steel and sweat around me, his legacy alive in every chord, every job I'd fought to keep. Music's my sanctuary now, late. Nights at the Keys, no longer my stage but my solace, a quiet echo of the girl I was. Leading this company stirred something deeper, a hunger I hadn't known, a joy in building, in solving, in standing tall. The gala's fire forged me. Humiliation turned to strength, doubt to clarity, and I found harmony, blending art with leadership, a life Dad would have grinned at. His trust wasn't just a gift. It was a call I'd answered, a balance I'd struck between the notes I played and the empire I grew. That night at Margaret's gala, her voice branding me a thief, the crowd's jeers ringing, could have shattered me, but it became my anvil instead. If family turns on you with lies, don't kneel. Rise, like I did, facing her venom with my father's unshakable truth until it broke her hold. You're worth more than their malice. See the manipulation for what it is. Claim your ground. Build a legacy that silences their noise. I turned her ambush into my ascent, took a company she coveted and made it thrive. 32 jobs, new markets, a foundation bearing Henry's name. The business world that cast me out now lifts me up, and I've learned, true inheritance isn't seized, it's earned through grit and grace. Music still flows through me, late-night chords a thread to my past. But leading Carter Manufacturing is my present, a harmony Dad saw before I did. Margaret fled, Elise bends, and I stand, artist and CEO, daughter and defender, proof that betrayal can forge strength if you wield it right. You can wield yours too. Don't let their shadows dim your light. If this story moved you, subscribe now. Share your thoughts below.